Welcome back to R&B Fantasy. My name is Ryan. I'm joined by just Bick today.
Yep, Boyd's
How we doing?
busy. This freaking guy, he's always up to no good. I
I
can't
know.
believe it. COVID boy is here, but boy, no, I'm just kidding. He's busy. He's got date night, nothing wrong with that. Just getting his love in. We
Mm,
love to see it. Fantasy
yep.
football has been kicking me in the fucking teeth. So there's that. It's been absolutely brutal, and I feel like my seasons are already destroyed. But other than that, things are pretty solid. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel that the whole, my season's over. I'm 0-2, even though there's like 10 or 11 more weeks of the regular season. So keep the faith, keep strong. Make sure you just keep, battling injuries and making scoops because eventually it's going to happen to other people. So hopefully you end up, getting a good string of luck later on.
That's crazy, dude. It's crazy.
It's absolutely insane. So, without further ado, we're going to get into today's episode. Rather, just a little bit of a shorter episode today. We're going to be going over some of the injuries that took place over the weekend that are notable for this upcoming week, and then also we're going to go over some waiver scoops that you guys could potentially be making to kind of help battle any injuries that you may be facing, or if you're in a deeper league and you just need the depth, these are also for you. So, without further ado. So, in terms of notable injuries, we have a lot of big names on here. So, Bick, I'll take the first four, and then you can finish us off with the last four.
Sure.
So, we have Deebo Samuel, who just popped up on the injury report about an hour ago from when we're recording this with a calf strain. The report is that he's going to be out multiple weeks. Who knows how many weeks that ends up being? But with a calf strain and Deebo, it's at least going to be 2 or 3, maybe even 4. So, we're not really sure. It's a very new report, so we'll keep monitoring the situation. But as of right now, we're going to talk about it a little later. But Juwan Jennings is definitely now an option and on your waiver wires. Evan Ingram also popped up in the pregame injury report. Ended up not playing this past weekend. It says that he's multiple weeks on a week-to-week basis with a hamstring strain, which is not ideal for those that roster Evan Ingram because the tight end landscape is very it's pretty bad. So losing Evan Ingram definitely doesn't help. Isaiah Pacheco is probably the biggest talking point we'll have today. He's out 6 to 8 weeks with a fractured fibula. So there are many options that could potentially come up with him, or depending on if they end up signing Kareem Hunt, who had just met with them today, it could muddy the situation even more. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then another one for those of you that, were hoping that Cooper Kupp could carry your teams while Puka was out. Unfortunately, he's likely to be put on the IR according to Sean McVay. So he could be out a minimum of 4 weeks, but he's out for multiple weeks with an ankle sprain. It's looking like it's going to be a little bit more severe. So I would guess 4 to 6 weeks on Cooper Kupp, which is less than ideal. And we'll talk about, the potential options that come out of that situation. Not very clear, but it is what it is. Boyd, I'll let you take it the rest of the way.
Yep. Bick, by the way. Anyway.
Oh, did I say Boyd?
Yeah, it's okay. I get it.
Okay.
I get it. We look alike. Deebo Samuel and Evan Ingram, by the way, I have on the same roster. I had to start Evan Ingram this week with a 0 because the way my league works is we do a waiver run at 11 o'clock every day. And after that, there's no free pickups. It's just fab always. So that actually sucked because that news came out around noon. Anyway, but I was against AJ Brown, so it kind of evened out a little bit. But AJ Brown, I think it was Friday, he was either limited or missed Friday's practice with a hamstring injury, and he's currently day to day with a hamstring. It's tough. I am hoping he's back next week, but I would say he probably misses next week based on what we've seen in the past. Kenneth Walker was out this week with an oblique injury. They said they're taking it slow, which, as Ryan has written down there, maybe a week-to-week thing. We'll see how it goes, but that's not what you want to hear. You don't want to hear we're going to take it slow. We're going to make sure he's 100% because when are football players ever 100%? And then last but not least, we have Justin Jefferson and Joe Mixon, who are at the bottom of this list just because they're both like day-to-day, we'll see kind of guys. There isn't much news on them yet. Justin Jefferson said he thinks he's going to play already with a quad injury. And Joe Mixon had an ankle injury. There's not much news on it, so that's kind of the list we got right now.
And for those of you, another one that we didn't add here, those of you that were worrying about Amon-Ra, apparently that was just something that happened during the game. It was a minor contusion along with cramps, so it doesn't look like he's going to be missing any time, which is also good. So We're not missing everybody at the top just yet. We'll get there though.
Yeah, no shit.
It's brutal out here. All right. So moving on to our waiver scoops, we have our QB pickups.
All right. So last year I was on the Derek Carr wagon, and it didn't go great. It had its moments. My dad had him in a bonus league, and like during his bonus weeks, Derek Carr was a stud, but we saw not a lot of fluency in that offense. It was a lot of dumping down to Kamara and Chris Olave, and outside of that, it was pretty much a dud. But this year, we've seen Clint Kubiak come in and absolutely change that offense. It seems like they're firing on all cylinders. I think they put up 40 back to back, if I'm not mistaken, which is incredible. And that is due to Derek Carr absolutely slinging that bitch right now. He's put up 25 points in back to back games. He's been the QB6 and the QB2, respectively. He's just been playing out of his mind. And I have been trying to stream with like Trevor Lawrence and Caleb Williams. So for me, Derek Carr is a priority ad just because I didn't get an elite option. And in week 3, he plays Philly. And, you know, Philly last year was a sieve for passing, and I don't really think much has changed. I personally think they got worse. So I think this should be a plus passing matchup for him. And then his matchups after that are Atlanta, Kansas City, Tampa Bay, and Denver, which there might be some generally tough defenses mixed in there, but I think they're all pretty pass heavy, or the script should allow more passing if things go the way that they could go. So I like Derek Carr a lot. He's my top priority in terms of quarterbacks this week. And then we have Geno Smith, who is averaging 20 points per game in his own right. He's been the QB6 and the QB2, or QB7 and QB6. My apologies. Weeks 3 and 4, he has Miami and Detroit, which are obviously favorable matchups for him. So, you know, we saw JSN break out this past week, and we saw DK Metcalf do what DK Metcalf does. So, I mean, with that new offensive scheme as well, it just seems like things are working for both of these quarterbacks right now in brand new systems. And I think they're pretty solid ads for not even deep leagues, just most leagues at this point.
Mm-hmm. And if Baker is also just somehow chilling on your waiver wire, you need to immediately add him because he's a startable quarterback for the foreseeable future. So, all right, moving on to our running backs. So we're going to go 1-1 here. So the biggest news that we had in terms of, big injuries was that Isaiah Pacheco was out 6 to 8 weeks. So that immediately opens up the running back room to who is going to end up being the most fantasy viable option. Now, the first two listed here are Samaje Perine and Carson Steele are the two options, but we don't really know where they're going to end up. So, Bick, I'll let you speak to Samaje Perine, and then I'll speak to Carson Steele.
Sure. So we know what Samaje Perine is at this point in his career. He's a guy that he's probably not handling 20 carries a game, but we know that he's an above average pass blocker. Teams like having him out there on long down and distance. They like having him out there on third downs. They like having him out there in passing situations. So the way that I kind of see this backfield shaping up, if Kareem Hunt doesn't get added into the mix, is probably going to be something like Samaje Perine and Carson Steele split the carries maybe. And then Samaje Perine gets the third down work. He gets the passing work, which is obviously in fantasy football way more valuable than just the rushing work. This could be wrong, but they brought Perine in for a reason, and it is for things that have to do with his passing ability, whether it's pass blocking or pass catching. So I think Perine is the priority ad here, just because his usage shouldn't be too far off from Carson Steele, but the type of usage he should have typically leads to more fantasy points. Everybody loves to talk about Jerick McKinnon a couple years ago and what that role did. And we saw Perine get increased passing work last year and this year. So we know that Mahomes will get his running backs the ball in the air, and that's the top priority in this offense for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Carson Steele is definitely not going to be getting any receiving work, or at least the bulk of it. He might get 1 or 2 targets a game, but like he's a converted fullback. He didn't see any targets when he was in the game last week. He did see 7 carries compared to Perine's 1, I believe it was. But I put much more faith in Samaje Perine. But at the same token, we don't know who's going to get the goal line carries. Perine is definitely not a small back either, but if Carson Steele's getting the goal line work, then that could be, viable option. He'll be touchdown dependent, in that RB3 territory, but they're both worth an ad. I would say Samaje Perine would probably be the more priority just because of his passing upside, but Carson Steele definitely If you have Fab, I would throw like maybe $5 on him just to see. But we're going to be releasing this on Monday. If Kareem Hunt somehow signs on Tuesday, I would not worry about him for week 3 because, it takes time to get acclimated to the offense. So I doubt he'll be active, or if he is active, he'll play very little snaps to any. But that could potentially, muddy the longer term solutions for like the later weeks. But we'll figure out kind of how this backfield will shake out after this week, if they don't end up signing Kareem Hunt. But try to add both if you can. But if you can only really get one, or you want to save some fab, like definitely go for P Ryan. But Steele's certainly an option because we'll see if he ends up getting more usage than we anticipate.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm wondering, this is a question for you. We didn't talk about this or anything, but if Hunt does get signed, would he be your priority ad over both of these guys, do you think? Or because we've just seen this story so many times, dude. Kareem Hunt is a free agent and nobody wants him until somebody gets hurt, and then he comes in and then he takes away all the fun for the guy that we thought was going to get the work, like Jerome Ford last year, for example.
Right.
I think for me, he would be the priority ad, not because I think he's good, just because I think they would use him. Because why bring him in to not use him? I mean, we're going to see Edwards-Helaire come back in a couple of weeks once he comes off the pup. So maybe that will deter them, or maybe they end up releasing Kareem Hunt. Who knows what they end up doing with that? But I was just wondering what you thought, just because this could happen between now and when this comes out. So
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be rushing to grab Kareem Hunt, but if I had the ability to, like, I'm in a deeper league, I may potentially have a spec ad if I can. I wouldn't really waste any fab budget on him. That could end up, coming to bite me, but I'd rather make the early moves on these guys. And then if Hunt ends up signing, like, it is what it is. I don't really. I think them signing P Ryan, because since he plays a similar role as Hunt, I don't believe that Kareem Hunt will see usage over him. It'll probably just make it so that they're all like not fantasy viable at that point.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
But I one of these guys could end up going down, and then the Kareem Hunt signing ends up working out. But I'm not going to bank on injuries. But that's kind of one of those things where it's like a wait and see. I can't really predict that just because he hasn't even signed yet.
Yeah, I get it. No, I was just just testing the waters a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
But the next guy on this list is Ty Chandler. As you can see, he's available in a little over half of leagues. So there's a chance if you're in a deeper league, he's probably not available. This is probably more relevant for like a 10-team league or more of a shallow bench maybe. But if he is available, he's clearly handcuffed. I'm not freaking out or anything, but he has gotten 10 touches one way or another in back-to-back games. He's playing 35% of the snaps, which obviously isn't something you really want to start in your lineup. But it's like if you throw him in the flex, you might get 7-8 points. And if he scores, you're looking at double digits. We also saw Aaron Jones make his way to the medical tent last week, or this week, I guess. And that's not something we're unfamiliar with. We see Aaron Jones get hurt pretty much every year in some capacity. We saw Green Bay never wanted to give him the lion's share of the touches because he can't handle it. And I might be panicking a little too early, but with the way these injuries have been going and what we already saw from Aaron Jones and what we know of Aaron Jones, I think Ty Chandler is worth an ad just at the end of your bench if you have the availability, because everybody always says to handcuff other people's players, and I am one of those people. And I think we saw Chandler put up RB2 numbers when he took over last year at the end of the year. And that offense is going to need help with Addison hurt and Jefferson may be hurt and whatever the heck is going on. So I think Chandler is a decent piece at the end of your bench that you could put in your lineup, but you really don't want to because it's not going to be great. But if Aaron Jones goes down, then you might have hit gold. So I think he's a pretty solid ad.
Yep. And especially if he pops up on the injury report throughout the week. And even if you have Aaron Jones, like, you definitely want to make sure you get Ty Chandler just in case. It could be like the whole Kenneth Walker situation where, he pops up on the injury report and then you just pick up his backup just in case. And then he ends up, having a longer absence than anticipated. So it's just one of those types of deals. In terms of our next player, we have Bucky Irving. Now, he was on, our waiver wire ads last week. He's rostered in 41.3% of leagues. This is more so a play of Rod White. Yeah. Rashad White's Rashad White's inefficiencies on the ground. Rashad White has had 25 carries on the year, and he's averaging 2 yards a carry. He's historically averaged under 3.5 throughout his career. He is mainly just, a fantasy viable running back through the air. And I could see a world where Bucky Irving ends up getting a lot more work. Like he saw 9 carries and 7 carries respectively the last week 1 and week 2. Granted, last week was a little less efficient, but when Rashad White was not on the field because he was, in the medical tent, Bucky Irving actually did look pretty good in pass pro. He certainly, I don't have like numbers to back it up. I couldn't really find any, but from watching the game itself, I did notice that he, even though he is a smaller guy, he did seem to block very well for a guy of his stature. So I wouldn't be surprised, he did see 3 targets in week 1. I wouldn't be surprised if, we saw a more even split as the year goes on. And especially if Rashad White goes down, like Bucky Irving is going to be a great fantasy asset, especially with how well the offense is in Tampa Bay is doing. So if Bucky Irving's still on your wire, I would definitely, stash him because I have a feeling that he's going to end up becoming a little bit more useful and potentially could be a league winner by the end of the season. So I would definitely make sure to have Bucky Irving on your roster.
Yeah, for sure. I know a ton of people love Bucky Irving. I wasn't one of those people just because I think the offensive line woes with Tampa is just too much for any running back personally. I think that's not the entire reason why Rashad White is the way he is, but I think it's a pretty important factor. But that being said, I do agree Rashad White has looked terrible, and I think a lot of smart people like Bucky Irving for a reason, and the team drafted him for a reason. So I'm definitely on board for that as a pickup as well. Very, very similar to Ty Chandler, except he may not need an injury to usurp the starter in front of him. So crazy things have happened.
Yep. So we'll see. So this is a little bit of a bigger list. These are our wide receiver pickups. Now, a lot of these are mainly just guys that you could potentially speculative add. There's no like clear cut, like you need to get him and put him in your lineups. This is more of just like picking up and seeing where it goes. There is one in Jalen Naylor that I'll get to where that could just be a spot start for the week if you desperately need it. So that's just kind of why he's there. But without further ado, I'll get right into it. So actually, excuse me, Juwan Jennings is your guy, so I'll let you go here.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen Juwan Jennings flash or anything like that. I mean, we have seen him in the past. We saw him in the Super Bowl. Like, the guy can make plays. They keep him on the roster every single year for a reason. I feel like he's been a Niner for forever. We already see that Debo's out. Ayuk clearly is not the same player that he was last year, at least not yet. Obviously, he's going to be a strong beneficiary of no Debo, but somebody has to step up. And I think Juwan Jennings is that guy. He plays enough. He's always on the field. He is just solid. It's hard to say like what he does without X, Y, and Z because every year is different and whatnot. But it's not a guy I'm like excited about. I'm not racing to the waiver wire to pick up Juwan Jennings, but we've seen the Niners kind of struggle a little bit without Christian McCaffrey. And I mean, they lost this week, played a pretty ass game, if you ask me. So they need someone on offense to step up, and Juwan Jennings, it wouldn't blow my mind if he became a 5 catch a game guy with Debo out of the lineup. So it's just someone that I think is an interesting thought of an ad. If you miss out on some of the other guys on this list, he's definitely not like a top priority. He's not at the top of the list because he's a top priority for me or anything like that. I just think he can have some immediate value, some short-term value, and then whenever Debo comes back, you just drop him. But
yeah, the order is more so in terms of the potential upside that they can carry, which is why we have Quentin Johnston at number 2, rostered in 60% of sleeper leagues. Quentin Johnston I was a big believer in him coming in as a rookie. And then he clearly displayed that he was not NFL caliber. He was pretty much, I would just already chalking him up to be a bust. But as we've seen the last couple of weeks, he is starting to get some usage, more than Josh Palmer, who everybody thought was going to be the number 1 wide receiver. I was also one of those people that thought that could potentially happen. But Quentin Johnston, he's not been seeing a crazy amount of targets, but he did see 2 red zone opportunities where he did burn the corner and made a great play in order to get a longer touchdown. His first one and then the second one, he was just targeted in the end zone, about a 10-yard throw. He saw in his first game 5 targets, in his second game 6 targets. So there is some usage there. I definitely think that if you're a believer in Quentin Johnston, this might be more exciting. I am hoping for a redemption arc simply just because I do like the guy, but I wouldn't be like have super high hopes that it ends up turning around. But then again, it was a wide open wide receiver room going into the season. Josh Palmer could end up ascending. It could be Ladd McConkey could completely ascend to being the top dog, or it could be very split between the three, with Quinn Johnson being a slight edge. We don't really know yet, but it's definitely worth adding him and seeing where it goes because there has been some encouraging signs to start the season. So our next guy, we have Jalen Naylor. Now, Jalen Naylor's only rostered in 4% of leagues. I was actually a big proponent of adding him last week because of Addison being out. However, with early reports that Addison could potentially be playing and Justin Jefferson could be playing, I wouldn't necessarily put any waiver claims or fab on him. But if either one of those guys end up being, a late scratch or, towards the end of the week, they're trending towards being out, I would definitely pick up Naylor just to kind of see where that goes because he did have a very good week this past week. I don't think he's anything, super special, but when, he's not like necessarily a handcuff either, but when one of those guys are out, he's definitely going to get some usage by Sam Darnold. And somehow Sam Darnold is not the worst QB in the NFL right now. And it's actually kind of funny to see. But yeah, he's kind of one of those spec ads in desperation flex plays if you really need it. But just make sure you keep an eye on him. And then we have these Rams wide receivers. Bick, who do you think would be your priority out of these three with Cooper Kupp and Puka down?
I think the roster percentage is pretty accurate as to how I feel. I think Demarcus Robinson is the clear one. Tyler Johnson, I like Tyler Johnson when he was coming into the league, and he pretty much just blew for the past couple of years, and now he's got an opportunity. Jordan Whittington is fun. He's a cool story. I don't know if he's gonna usurp these guys in terms of productivity, but this is the Chargers wide receiver room reborn. This is a whole bunch of shitters that are all vying for targets. I think Demarcus Robinson, we've seen him produce last year. We've seen him produce already this year. I think he's the number one, and then Tyler Johnson's the number two. Obviously, try to pick up at least one of those two guys. Whittington isn't my style, but at the same time, if you have a spot, why not? He should be available. So I would be running to waivers to pick up Demarcus Robinson, though. Out of everybody, obviously he's rostered in the most amount of leagues out of the players on this list for a good reason. But if he's not rostered in your league, I picked him up last week. I'm picking him up this week. I'm spending a decent amount of fab on him because those two top dogs in LA are a mess right now. And who knows when we see them both again on the field. And I think we know Stafford is going to sling it, and that's the guy that I want to roster. But Tyler Johnson has also shown flashes in the very short sample size we've seen this year. So I think they're both solid ads, and Whittington is kind of like a why not flyer.
And then there's also Tutu Atwell just lurking in the shadows, but honestly, I think in terms of, for me, it would be Demarcus Robinson and Jordan Whittington, just because, I have no doubt in my mind that he had such a great preseason, and now he has a little bit of an opportunity to get some more work. I definitely it wouldn't surprise me if we end up seeing him being used way more. He did see some work last week after Cooper Kupp went down. It was only 2 receptions on 2 targets, but he could end up emerging as, being that guy, because he's kind of an unknown because he's a rookie. So we don't really know what we're getting with him. Yeah. And that to me carries a little more upside than Tyler Johnson, but we have no idea how this is going to shake out. So Tyler Johnson definitely would be an ad if you want to be a little bit more safe. If I'm in a deeper league, I'm just going to take Jordan Whittington just because it's fun, and I can definitely see a world where he ends up being pretty decent. But it's one of those things where Demarcus Robinson is the only clear-cut option that you want to actually go out and add, and the other two are just speculative.
Yeah.
So,
and last but not least is my guy Jalen Polk. He didn't have a monster game last week. This play is very different from the rest of these guys. This play to me is you are stashing and you are waiting and you're trying to beat everybody to the punch. And I've already talked about him in the past on this show, I'm pretty sure. but he had 3 targets, 2 catches for 12 yards and a touchdown, his first NFL career touchdown, nothing crazy. But the Patriots organization said they wanted to get him more involved starting this week. And we already saw his snaps go up. He outsnapped Demario Douglas and Thornton after playing behind them last week. It's very minute differences, but I'm going to take anything I can right now. And so he's playing above them now. He led the wide receivers in targets with 3, which is like not much to sniff at, but it was KJ Osborne with 2, and then everybody else has 0. So he was the only wide receiver that got really any sort of work. And we know KJ Osborne is only on the team so that Jalen Bulk can take over, because that's what KJ Osborne's role is on every team, is to get usurped. So that's going to happen. And they also gave him a rushing attempt too. So they're trying to get the ball in his hands. The Pats ran the ball 36 times against Seattle, including the one time by Jalen Polk. And how many opportunities are the Pats going to have to do that again in the future? I just don't see many. It's clear that the running backs are a staple of this team, but I think Polk is very quickly going to become a staple of this team as well. And as we see Brissett get shifted into Drake May, I think that upside goes up even more. So I think Polk is a beautiful add this week before things really start popping off. And you can get him, I shouldn't say for free if he's available right now, but you can get him, pretty cheap. So I think he's a very solid add this week and any other week that he's available. He shouldn't be available, in my opinion, but he's available in 70% of leagues. So
yeah, as a Pats fan, I'd love to see one of the wide receivers actually do well, because it's been a while since we've seen a good wide receiver outside of Jacoby Myers, of course. So speaking of the Patriots, we have our tight end pickups. Now, the tight end landscape is just absolutely horrendous. A lot of the top guys are underperforming. We have guys that are already hurt. So it's been a little bit of a ride thus far. So hopefully, like all 3 of these guys could end up being viable. Especially if you had Ingram or Njoku go down for you, or if you did also tried to do the likely situation. These could also be guys that you have on your bench just in case you want to flip flop. Hunter Henry, we have here. He's only rostered in 22% of leagues. He just saw 12 targets last week. He ended with 15 fantasy points if you're not in a tight end premium league. He is currently a top 4 tight end. It also depends on the format that you're in, but he has led this team in targets the first 2 weeks. Also in receptions, because believe it or not, in the first 2 weeks, there have only been 12 receptions by wide receivers in New England in the first 2 weeks, which is absolutely bananas. But Jacoby Brissett clearly likes him. Maybe if Drake May ends up seeing more playing time, a little bit earlier, we could see how that pans out. But as of right now, it looks like Hunter Henry is the go-to target for Brissett when they decide to actually pass the ball. So I would definitely make it a priority. He's one of the few ads this week where I definitely think that there's some level of priority, more so because of how bad the position has been, but also because he has a decent floor with how much he's getting usage. He's not going to be like a barn burner like Brock Bowers or George Kittle can be, but he can get the volume. He'll get some red zone work. So it's kind of one of those things where you take what you can get at this position, and he gives you a pretty decent amount.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like a broken record at this point. How many times in our fantasy lives have we seen Hunter Henry, Zach Ertz, and Mike Gesicki on tight end waiver lists? It's a tale as old as time. It happens every year. They're always volatile or whatever. We know what's going to happen. There's going to be, still getting over the COVID. Zero consistency with these guys. Plus, this is disgusting. It makes me sick. But, out of all these guys, Hunter Henry is obviously going to be the most consistent, in my opinion. The next, I think, is Zach Ertz. And talk about disgusting. I can't believe I am trying to tell people to start Zach Ertz or pick up Zach Ertz at least. Probably don't start him, but you might have to, depending on your situation. I might have to this week, for God's sake. But, he's been with Kingsbury before. He's had very modest usage, but, like I said, with Polk, I'm trying to pull any little thing I can. 12.5 yards per reception is very, very solid for Zach Ertz. He's the type of guy that can see 4 or 5 catches a game, and that adds up pretty quickly. That gives you damn near double digits without a touchdown. if he can get 4 or 5 catches. So if he gets an increase in volume or he starts scoring touchdowns or whatever it may be, in tight end premium, he's tight end 7 right now. 7. Tight end 7, Zach Ertz. Like averaging 9 points per game in tight end premium. So I know not everybody plays tight end premium, but I do for the most part, which is why I pull that stat up. But nonetheless, he's probably still a top 12 tight end, which is just like ridiculous and obviously shouldn't last because these elite guys will be elite at some point, I hope. But until that happens, Ingram's hurt, Ferguson's hurt, and Njoku's hurt. Like, you might have to use him. And if Hunter Henry's gone, I think Zach Ertz is grossly viable. You might end up with 5 points on 3 catches for 25 yards, but at this point, you're kind of celebrating that from the tight end position. So that's all I got on Zach Ertz. Sorry.
Yeah, and for those of you that are in half PPR formats, Hunter Henry is 5, Mike Gesicki is 6, and Zach Ertz is 7 as of right now. And that's barring Monday Night Football, which is about to start in about 10 minutes. So our last tight end option here is Mike Gesicki. Now, this is slightly contingent on T. Higgins availability, because if T. Higgins comes back, I don't believe Mike Gesicki will be all that great of an option. However, he did just lead their passing attack this past week. He led their team in receiving yards and targets. He had 9 targets, 7 receptions for 91 yards. Didn't have a touchdown, but he ended up in half PPR at tight end 5 this week. Last week, he only had 4 targets on 3 receptions for 18 yards. And he did have that one touchdown called back at the very end where he made a great grab, but it ended up, as he hit the ground, it did come out. So that would have saved his line. He is getting some red zone work. So I would definitely, if you're in a 12-team league and you're dealing with tight end issues, Mike Gesicki is definitely one of those options where if you know that someone's going to spend money on Hunter Henry, he's definitely like an option that you could get away for cheap and, hope for the best that he does end up getting as much volume as he did last week. They are facing Washington in week 3 and they're facing Carolina in week 4. So very, very poor offenses. And after that, they're facing Baltimore, whose secondary has been looking a little bit shaky. So that's 3 straight weeks of potentially great, receiving, great games for the receivers in Cincinnati. So if Mike Gesicki ends up being the second highest target earner in that time frame, hopefully he is ahead of Iosivas, who also had a great week. I definitely think that he is more viable, in my opinion, than Zach Ertz. But all 3 of these guys are kind of like, you have to take the shot if you're desperate because the tight end landscape is so bad.
Right.
But
I have 2 points. One, fun fact, I'm pretty sure this past week, there were the most receptions by tight ends on the Bengals in like the Joe Burrow era. Like him and Eric All or whoever else was catching passes out there. Like it's the most catches the tight end room combined has had in a game ever since Joe Burrow has been quarterback there. And secondly, I would like to give an honorable mention to Colby Parkinson again. He was my sleeper last week. And I felt really good about it, and it fucking shit the bed. But with Cup out and Puka out, I think there's a very viable path for him to go back into that higher volume, low A dot role that I talked about last week. And I do think there's still some upside there. I do think he's an athlete. I drafted him in a bunch of best balls, and I do believe in him still. So if somebody drops him after last week to pick up one of these guys or whatever it may be, if he's just sitting there, I would say he's viable as well. I didn't have that written up. That was just something I thought of on the fly when we were talking about all the Rams. But I think that's a very interesting ad as well. Also, if you pick up Zach Ertz, you can make your team name My Ball Zach Ertz. And that's just a classic. Everybody loves My Ball Zach Ertz. So
the classic cringy name that nobody wants to
for a week until you drop him. But like,
this year is Hawk Tua, and then and that just kind of made me forget about Ball Zach Ertz.
Like terribly.
So, all right. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. It was a little bit different than our normal episodes. Make sure you guys like the video. Make sure you guys subscribe if you're new. Follow all of our socials down below. And make sure you guys follow us on Twitter. I have myself, Bick, and Boyd, who is our other member who couldn't join us today. So make sure you guys tune in later this week for when we go over our trade targets. That'll be coming around Thursday. And then we're going to be doing a week 3, looking forward to start sit decisions, potential sleepers on the week, like we had done last week, which we had a very high hit rate that we'll go over in the episode. So we thank you all for watching. Comment down below who you are going to try to make a push for on your waiver wires. And we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.
Peace.